This little girl claims she can stop a millionaire's execution, but moments later, someone appears behind her and does something terrible. Comment giving my story a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The sound of small footsteps echoed through the chilly hallways of the penitentiary, shattering the heavy silence that dominated that somber place. 4-year-old Waverly, thin and frail as if she were only 2, walked slowly between the iron bars, searching for any scraps of food that might have been forgotten by the prisoners. Her large, frightened eyes scanned every corner, every shadow, always alert so as not to be seen by the guards who would throw her out again. For 3 months, she'd been sneaking into this place through a hole in the back fence, a space too small for any adult, but perfect for a malnourished and desperate child. Hunger had brought her here the first time, but something else kept her coming back every day, the feeling that those locked-up men were also lost, just like her. On that grey winter afternoon, while rummaging through a trash can near the cafeteria, her small ears picked up voices whispering conspiratorially. 2 uniformed figures were talking in the adjacent corridor, their words reaching her as fragments of a conversation she wasn't supposed to hear. "It's scheduled for early morning," one of the men murmured, checking his surroundings before continuing. "That millionaire from cell 12. They say he asked them to speed up the process himself." "No wonder," the other replied, shaking his head. "After what they did to his wife, any man would lose the will to live." What a tragedy! Waverly's childish curiosity was immediately piqued. She knew that cell. She'd passed by it several times during her nightly forays in search of food. There was always a man sitting in the corner, staring into nothing, but she had never approached him. Adults scared her, especially after all the bad experiences she'd had on the streets. But this time, something pulled her in that direction. Maybe it was the word tragedy echoing in her mind, reminding her of her own story of loss. Or maybe it was simply the intuition of a child who recognized suffering wherever it was. When she reached cell 12, her eyes beheld a sight that took her breath away. Sitting on the cold floor, leaning against the concrete wall, was the most handsome man she had ever seen. Even in the orange prison uniform, even with his disheveled hair and his face marked by despair, he looked like a soap opera heartthrob, the kind her mom used to watch before everything changed. The 30-year-old millionaire raised his eyes when he sensed the girl's presence. For a moment both stared at each other in absolute silence. He saw a skeletal child, with dirty and torn clothes, but whose eyes carried a strange wisdom, as if she had lived much longer than her 4 years allowed. She saw a broken man, someone who had lost everything and awaited the end with a resignation that reminded her of herself in the worst moments. "You shouldn't be here, little one," he said with a hoarse voice, trying to wave her away. "This isn't a place for children." But Waverly didn't move. Instead, she took a step forward, grabbing the bars with her tiny hands. "I know you didn't do it," she whispered, her childish voice echoing through the empty corridor. The man frowned, confused by those words. "What did you say?" "I know you didn't do what they say you did," she repeated, this time with more firmness. "I saw it." For a moment, the silence was total. The millionaire felt his heart race, a spark of hope igniting in his chest after months of complete darkness. How could this child know anything? How could she have seen anything related to his case? "Little girl, you don't know what you're talking about," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "You're too young to understand these things." Waverly shook her head vigorously. "I'm not new to the head," she replied, using an expression she had learned on the streets. "I saw you that night. I was in your garden looking for food in the trash when it all happened." The impact of those words was like a punch to the man's stomach. He stood up quickly, approaching the bars with wide eyes. "What night? What garden? What are you talking about?" "The night your wife—" Waverly paused, searching for the right words. "The night she went away forever. I was hiding behind the big plants near the pool. I saw her arguing with a man who wasn't you." The millionaire felt his legs weaken. Throughout all these months he had insisted on his innocence, but no one believed him. All the evidence pointed to his guilt. His fingerprints on the gun, the financial motive of the divorce that was being processed, the witnesses who confirmed his constant arguments with his wife. But now, a 4-year-old child was standing there, saying that she had witnessed something that could change everything. "Are you sure of what you saw?" he asked, kneeling to be at her height. "Are you absolutely sure?" Waverley nodded, and to his surprise, took out of her torn shirt a small, dented metal box. "I picked this up that night," she said, offering the object through the bars. "It was on the ground near where they argued. I thought it might be important." With trembling hands, the millionaire took the box. When he opened it, his world collapsed and rebuilt itself at the same time. Inside the small metal box, the millionaire found photographs blurred by moisture and a gold ring that he recognized immediately. It wasn't his wedding band. It was the ring his wife had inherited from her first husband, the one she swore she had lost months before her departure. His hands trembled as he examined the blurred images, where he could distinguish silhouettes embracing in an environment that seemed to be the law firm where she worked. "Where exactly did you find this?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. "Near the glass table in the garden," Waverley replied, pressing her face against the cold bars. "The man who argued with your wife dropped it when he ran away. She yelled at him a lot, said bad things that my mom always said kids can't repeat." The millionaire's heart raced. The glass table in the garden had been broken on that fateful night, and the official version was that he himself had destroyed it during a violent argument with his wife. But if that child was telling the truth, then there was someone else present at the scene, someone that no one had mentioned during the whole trial. "Can you remember what that man looked like?" he insisted, trying to keep his voice calm so as not to scare the girl. The child closed her eyes for a moment, as if she were rewinding the memories in her small mind. "He was tall, taller than you. He wore a dark suit and had a scar on his right hand, right here," she said, touching her own wrist. "And he smelled really strong, just like the cologne the man at the bakery wears." That description made the millionaire's blood run cold. He knew only one person with a scar exactly in that place. His own wife's lawyer, the man who had conducted the divorce proceedings and who, ironically, had testified against him during the trial. The same person who had insisted that she hire a private investigator to protect her financial interests during the separation. "My God," he murmured, running his hands over his face. He was there. He really was there that night. The girl watched him with her big, sad eyes, not fully understanding the impact of her words, but realizing that she had awakened something important in the man in front of her. During her months living on the streets, she had learned to read people's expressions, to identify when someone was lying or when they really cared. "Do you believe me?" she asked, her voice carrying a vulnerability that broke the millionaire's heart. "I believe you," he replied without hesitation. "But the problem is that there are only a few hours left before it's too late. And who's going to believe the testimony of a 4-year-old child against all the evidence that they've presented against me?" It was at that moment that the girl did something that surprised him completely. She squatted on the floor and drew with her finger in the dust accumulated in the corridor, creating simple but recognizable shapes. The floor plan of the house, the exact location where she was hiding, the path that the mysterious man had taken to escape. Her memory was impressively detailed for someone so young. "I remember everything," she said, proud of her improvised work. "My sister always said that I have a good head for remembering things." She works in the big building where the men in suits make important decisions. The millionaire felt a new wave of hope. "What building is that? Where does your sister work?" "The building where they bang the hammer and decide who's guilty and who's not," explained the girl, using the simple description that her sister had given her about the courthouse. She cleans the big rooms every night, after everyone leaves. The revelation was like a ray of light in the darkness. If the girl's sister worked at the courthouse, maybe there was a way to get the evidence to the right people. But time was running out quickly, and he knew that the system didn't stop because of new last-minute evidence, especially coming from such unlikely sources. "Little one, I need you to understand something very important," he said, kneeling again to speak to her face to face. "If what you're telling me is true, and I believe it is, you can save the life of an innocent man. But you can also put yourself in a lot of danger." The girl tilted her head, considering his words with an impressive seriousness for her age. "My mom always said that doing the right thing sometimes hurts, but that's what makes us good people. I want to be a good person." At that moment, the millionaire felt a deep connection with that child who had emerged from nowhere like an improbable angel. Both had lost everything, he his freedom and reputation, she her family and security. But perhaps, together, they could find a way to recover at least part of what had been taken from them. "What's your name?" he asked, realizing that he had forgotten to ask the basics. "On the street they call me Little One," she replied, shrugging her shoulders. "But my mom called me her treasure." "Then that's what I'm going to call you," he said, smiling for the first time in months. "Treasure, you said your sister works at the courthouse at night." The girl nodded vigorously. "She gets there when the sun goes away and only comes home when the sun is rising again. Sometimes she lets me go with her, but I have to promise to stay quiet and not touch anything." The plan began to form in the millionaire's mind. It was risky, unlikely, and dependent on many variables that were out of his control, but it was the only chance he had. He needed to convince that child to take the evidence to her sister, who in turn would need to find a way to present it to the competent authorities. "Treasure, would you be able to take this box to your sister tonight? And would you be able to tell her exactly what you told me now?" The girl took the box back and held it against her chest, as if it were the most precious object in the world. "I can. But what if she doesn't believe me? What if she says I'm making up stories?" "Then we're going to have to hope that she sees the truth in your eyes," he replied, "just like I did." As the afternoon turned into night, the two unlikely allies discussed every detail of the plan. The girl absorbed each instruction with impressive concentration, repeating everything back to ensure that she had understood correctly. It was as if, at that moment, she had found a purpose that went beyond simple survival on the streets. When it finally came time for her to leave, the millionaire held her small hand through the bars for a moment. "Treasure, regardless of what happens tonight, I want you to know that you've already given me the greatest gift that anyone can give to another person: hope." The girl smiled, and for the first time since she had lost her family, she felt that perhaps there was still goodness in the world. The night fell upon the city like a heavy cloak, and the girl ran through the empty streets, carrying the precious metal box against her chest. Her bare feet hit the cold asphalt as she headed to the small apartment where she lived with her sister, a tiny place in the basement of an abandoned building that they had transformed into a home. When she arrived, she found her sister preparing for another night of work at the courthouse. The 22-year-old woman, thin and tired, wore the blue uniform of the cleaning company as she tied her hair in a tight bun. Her eyes widened when she saw the girl arrive, breathless and agitated. "Where were you? I was worried," said the sister, kneeling to examine the child. "And what is that you're holding?" With rushed words and dramatic gestures, the girl told the whole story. The handsome man in prison, the night in the mansion garden, what she had seen and heard. The sister listened in growing silence, her expression changing from confusion to incredulity, and finally to something close to terror. "Are you absolutely sure of what you're telling me?" she asked, taking the box and examining its contents. The blurred photographs and the ring shone under the dim light of the lamp hanging from the ceiling. "I'm sure of everything," replied the girl with conviction. "The good man in prison is going to die early morning if no one finds out the truth. And I know the truth." The sister ran her hands over her face, struggling against a terrible dilemma. During her 2 years working at the courthouse, she had learned how the system worked, how decisions were made, and how difficult it was to reverse a finalized trial. But she had also learned to recognize injustices when she saw them. "If I do this," she said finally, "we could both end up in serious trouble. Powerful people don't like it when their decisions are questioned, especially by people like us." "But he's innocent," insisted the girl, "and innocent people shouldn't pay for things they didn't do. You taught me that yourself." At that moment, the sister realized that she had created a moral monster, a child who took justice more seriously than many adults. She took a deep breath and made a decision that would change their lives forever. "All right, let's try. But you're going to have to come with me tonight and tell your story to anyone who can help us. Can you do that?" The girl nodded vigorously, and together they went out for what would be the most important night of their lives. The courthouse at night was a completely different place than during the day. The corridors echoed with their solitary footsteps, and the empty rooms seemed to keep secrets in the shadows. The sister knew every corner of that building, every escape route, every person who might be present at that time. "Is there anyone else who still works here at night besides you?" asked the girl, impressed with the size of the place. "The judge responsible for your friend's case usually stays late when he has important decisions to review," replied the sister, leading her through the corridors. "But I don't know if he'll listen to us. Important men usually don't listen to people like us." When they reached the floor of the offices, the sister stopped in front of a door where the light was still on. She took a deep breath and knocked 3 times, her heart beating so hard that it seemed like it would echo through the corridors. "Come in," came a tired voice from inside the room. The judge was a man of 60 years, grey hair and small glasses that reflected the light from the table. When he saw the 2 figures at the door, a cleaning lady and a dirty child, he frowned with irritation. "What does this mean? You know you can't bring visitors during work hours," he said to the sister. "Judge, I apologize for the intrusion, but this child has information about the case of the man who's scheduled to be executed early morning," said the sister, gently pushing Waverly forward. "What kind of information could a child have about such a complex case?" the judge asked, but something in his tone indicated genuine curiosity. Waverly took a step forward, extending the metal box. "I saw who really did wrong to his wife, and I kept this." For the next 20 minutes, the girl told her story once again, this time with even more detail. She described the exact position where she was hiding, the approximate time of the events, the words she had heard, and especially the appearance of the mysterious man who had argued with the millionaire's wife. The judge examined the photographs with a magnifying glass, studied the ring from different angles, and asked dozens of specific questions to test the consistency of the child's account. With each answer, his expression became more grave. "The description you gave of the man with the scar," he said finally, "corresponds exactly to the lawyer who represented the wife during the divorce, the same man who testified against the defendant during the trial." "Does that mean the good man didn't do anything bad?" asked the girl, her eyes shining with hope. "It means we need to investigate this new evidence immediately," replied the judge, picking up the phone. "Even if it's almost midnight." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. The judge made calls to prosecutors, investigators, and even to the lawyer who had been identified by the girl. With each conversation, more pieces of the puzzle fell into place, revealing a conspiracy that had gone unnoticed by everyone. They discovered that the lawyer and the millionaire's wife had been having a secret affair for over a year, that he had manipulated evidence during the divorce proceedings to ensure that she received the majority of her husband's fortune, and that when she threatened to expose their relationship for fear of legal consequences, he had made a desperate decision. The irony, the judge said to the sister while the girl slept in a nearby chair, is that he planted so much false evidence against the husband that he almost pulled off the perfect crime. If it weren't for your little sister, an innocent man would have died this morning. At 5 in the morning, as the first rays of sun began to enter through the windows of the courthouse, the execution was officially suspended. The real culprit was being arrested at that very moment, and the millionaire, who had spent months on death row, was being informed that he would be released later that day. But for the girl and her sister, the true victory wasn't in the justice that had been served. It was in the discovery that their voices, however small, could still make a difference in the world. When the girl woke up in the chair at the courthouse, the first thing she asked was, "Is the good man safe now?" "He's safe," replied the judge, smiling at her. "Thanks to you, a great injustice was avoided." But none of them knew that this was only the first of many twists and turns that were yet to come, and that the real story behind that case was much more complex than anyone imagined. 3 weeks after his release, the millionaire sat in his partially empty mansion, contemplating the ruins of his former life. Most of his fortune had been spent on legal costs, and his reputation in the business community was shattered. Many stock investments he possessed had been liquidated to pay lawyers, and even his cash assets were significantly reduced. The doorbell rang, interrupting his dark thoughts. When he opened the door, he found the girl standing on the threshold, wearing clean clothes that were clearly too big for her. Beside her stood her sister, who was holding a small cardboard suitcase. "We came to give this back to you," said the girl, extending the metal box that had saved his life. "And we also came to tell you something very important." The man knelt to be at her height, realizing that there was something different about her behavior. She seemed more serious, heavier, as if she were carrying a secret that pained her inside. "What happened, treasure?" The sister took a deep breath before speaking. "We found out some things about our family that changed everything. About who we really are, and why she always knew so many details about that night." In the days following the release, investigators had continued digging deeper into the case, trying to understand all the ramifications of the conspiracy. It was during this investigation that they discovered the true identity of the two sisters and the devastating connection they had to the case. "Our father," said the sister with a trembling voice, "was a private investigator. He had been secretly hired by someone who suspected that you were being framed. For months, he investigated your wife and her lawyer, collecting evidence that they were plotting something against you." The girl continued the story, her words coming out in small fragments, as if each revelation cost a piece of her soul. "He used to tell me stories about the handsome man who was being tricked by the bad wife. But I thought they were just made-up stories to make me go to sleep." The millionaire felt the world spinning around him. "Are you saying that your father was investigating my case, that he knew I was innocent?" "He knew," confirmed the sister, "and he was killed for it." The truth unfolded like a nightmare. The girl's father had discovered not only the relationship between the wife and the lawyer, but also their plan to eliminate any obstacle to their goals. When he got too close to the truth, when he began to collect enough evidence to expose everything, they made a terrible decision. "That night in the garden," said the girl, tears starting to stream down her face. "I wasn't there by chance looking for food. I was following my dad. He had told me to stay hidden and only come out when he called, but he never called." The silence that followed was deafening. The millionaire slowly understood that the girl had witnessed not just an argument, but something much worse, that her father had arrived in the garden that night with evidence that could have saved the situation, but that he never had a chance to deliver it. "The man with the scar was there to meet our father," continued the sister. "When your wife realized that she had been discovered, she called the lawyer. They made it look like our father had suffered an accident. And then they planted evidence to blame you for what happened to her. The complexity of the conspiracy was impressive and terrifying. The couple had orchestrated not one, but two tragedies, eliminating both the investigator who threatened them and the conspiracy itself, since the wife had become too great a risk when she began to show remorse. "But how did you find out all this now?" asked the millionaire, trying to process the magnitude of what he was hearing. "When the lawyer was arrested, he tried to make a deal with the prosecutor," explained the sister. "He confessed everything, including what they did to our father. He thought it would reduce his sentence." The girl approached him and held his hand with her small hands. "I remember more things now, things my father told me before that night. He said that you had a little boy my age, and that the boy was missing his daddy." The millionaire's heart stopped. "My son? Do you know anything about my son?" During the trial, his wife had claimed that the child was living with distant relatives for safety, away from the violence of the father. No one had questioned this, and he hadn't seen the boy in over a year. "She didn't give him to relatives," said the sister softly. "Our father found out where she really put him. It's all in the files that the police found in the lawyer's office." The revelations continued falling like dominoes. The millionaire's son had been placed in a shelter under a false identity, kept away from his father to ensure that he couldn't use the child as motivation to fight the charges. It was a calculated cruelty that cut deeper than any financial loss. "Where is he now?" asked the man, his voice breaking. "The social workers have already picked him up," replied the sister. "He should be arriving here this afternoon." When the moment finally arrived, the millionaire waited at his doorstep with his heart pounding. An official car pulled up in front, and out of it came a 4-year-old boy with the same green eyes as his father, but thin and frightened by the months of forced abandonment. Father and son looked at each other for a moment that seemed eternal. Then the boy ran into his father's arms, and both cried as if the world were falling apart and rebuilding itself at the same time. "Daddy," whispered the boy, "I knew you were going to find me." But the story still had one last twist in store. While the two families were trying to rebuild their lives, they discovered that they had more in common than they imagined. The girl's sister had lost her job at the courthouse after all the commotion of the case, and they had nowhere to go. "I have a proposal for you," said the millionaire to the two sisters a few days later. "This house is too big for just the two of us, and you saved my life and the life of my son. How about you become our family?" The girl ran to him and hugged him with all the strength of her 4 years. "Does that mean I'm going to have a daddy again? And a little brother?" "It means we're going to take care of each other," he replied, kissing the top of her head. "Like real families do." 6 months later, the four lived together in the mansion that had been renovated and filled with children's laughter. The millionaire had rebuilt part of his fortune through new investments and more careful applications, but discovered that true wealth was in the people he loved. The girl and his adopted son played in the same garden where so much suffering had happened, but now it was a place of joy and safety. And every night before going to sleep, she still sang the song that her mother had taught her, but now it was no longer a solitary lament, but a song of gratitude for having found her true family. Justice had been done, the guilty punished, and 2 orphaned children had found a new home. But more important than all that, they had discovered that even in the darkest moments, the truth always finds a way to shine. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story, giving it a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.